There we go.
Where did it come?
All right. All right, so without further ado, I will pass it over to Maya. If you want to, you can stand here, then it gets you better, and I can be computer guru.
Perfect.
That's actually, I'll reach that stuff.
Okay, hi everyone. Nice to see all of you
Hello.
again.
Hi.
Like Marissa said, I'm trying to jump off kind of from what we did last time. So I know a lot of you were here last time. But I also want to leave space for questions about what happened, what we talked about last time as well. The usual like initial trauma-informed care training I provide for CHAN teams is very similar to what Michaela did. So I'm happy to answer questions about anything that happened there. For what we're gonna do tonight, I want it to be a lot more interactive because now we know some of the basics about trauma-informed care. I'm gonna talk just briefly about the refugee experience specifically. And then I have put together basically like case scenarios, right? So I'm in grad school, we do case scenarios all the time. And when Marissa said she wanted to do a second training, I kind of thought, you know, maybe that would be a good idea, something to get you guys thinking of how you would handle a situation as volunteers who are going to continue working with asylum seekers who will continue to see trauma. So I'll cover this section pretty quickly and then we'll do those case scenarios. So I'll kind of let you guys be in groups. We'll read it all together. People online maybe can be in a group together too. There's no right or wrong answers. Just talk about how you would handle a situation and then we'll come back and maybe unpack them together. So I've got 4 of those scenarios and then throughout the whole time we can do questions. So yeah, that's kind of my plan for tonight.
Okay.
Okay, so talking specifically about the refugee experience, and how that influences trauma and trauma-informed care. Understanding that the refugee experience or asylum seeker experience, I'm kind of using those terms interchangeably. Trauma usually stems from man-made trauma. Most people have experienced multiple losses. Sometimes they have lost people right in front of them. Gender-based violence is common in the refugee populations. A lot of asylum seekers or refugees have lived in very unsafe circumstances. So that puts them more at risk for gender-based violence. Forced isolation is also a part of the experience. A lot of CHAN clients have been in detention in the US, which is an added layer of trauma. You know, coming here for a better life and immediately being put into prison, essentially. And then understanding that most refugees are experiencing complex form of trauma. So it's multiple or repeated traumatic experiences. It's not just one thing, one time. It's a myriad of things over a lot of years. So that kind of takes me to my graphic here. Something we talk about in the trauma world when we're talking about refugees is the triple trauma paradigm. So this is basically the idea that there is trauma happening in your home country, which is causing you to flee. Thank you. Perfect. Trauma happening in your home country, causing you to flee. So a lot of people, that's war, persecution, forced labor, discrimination, religious persecution, gender-based violence, anything like that is the cause of you having to leave your home. Most people don't choose to leave their home willingly. Migration, there's trauma that happens during migration. So a lot of people go through dangerous journeys to get here. Human trafficking is a huge issue when people are migrating. Questions about the legal process. So a few weeks ago, I was in El Paso and Las Cruces for 5 days on a trip there. And me, as someone who is a native English speaker, who is educated, who works in immigration, I kept saying I'm confused while I was there. So just understanding how confusing it is for people who don't necessarily speak English, who don't know what they're expecting when they're gonna cross the border, how things change based on, you know, who they encounter at the border. And the legal process is inherently traumatic in the United States. Questions of safety, unknown future, and then maybe guilt about people you've left behind can be a part of that migration journey. And then understanding once people get here, trauma doesn't end, right? even if they're in a safe context, if they're in with the host home or they're in an apartment, they are surrounded by people who are here to help them and take care of them. That doesn't mean that their traumatic experiences are over. There is still discrimination and racism in the United States. Like they said, they're still going through the legal process, which is inherently traumatic. Sometimes there's family separation going on. It's traumatic to not be able to take care of yourselves for a lot of people. A lot of people who are adults who have lived full lives are now in a new circumstance where they don't know how to take care of themselves. That can be really difficult to understand. Not being able to control things is something that I encounter a lot with our clients. They have trouble making decisions for themselves because they don't understand the systems or the processes here. And that can be really difficult to navigate. And then, of course, news of home, the people you've left back home, not being able to contact them can be really difficult. And then also understanding there's trauma that is unrelated to war and migration that also happens, right? Maybe it's, a car accident or just grieving a loss of someone, illness or injury. Things that we have all gone through as human beings, that can kind of make things a little bit more difficult on top of that. Okay. So that's all I really have to say about the refugee experience. I know I can go back. I have a lot of slides. They very much look like what Michaela did with all of you. So if we want to go back and review, I can do that. How are you guys feeling with connecting what was talked about last time and kind of moving into what we're doing now?
Who was able to be at the last training, just to get a sense of who's in the room? But they're not, who was actually able to attend that training, especially since my recording was miserably? Because not everyone was there.
Not there.
You were not there? Okay, who was not there? Okay, so we've got about half and half. Would you like a little more
I went to your
recap?
recap.
Oh, yes, some of you went to
We got a
the
recap.
recap.
Okay.
Right, you did my best. Recapping. Okay,
I'm sure it was great. Okay, so let's try maybe our first case scenario. See how you feel about it. If we need to go back and do a refresher, I'm happy to do that. That's why I'm here.
and Maya has shared these slides with me, so I will share them and anyone can review those at whatever useful point, when you have time or when you're like, oh, I wish I could remember.
Okay. Oh, this is my in practice slide. We can talk about that at some point too. Okay, so some of these scenarios have been taken from, I did a training with interns at Lutheran Family Services who are social work students, so they're future clinicians, but I tried to make them more fitting for volunteer situations. So in all of these scenarios, I want you to think that the person that I'm describing is someone that you are working with. They're basically your Chan guest that you are involved with. It lays out a lot of information. And my kind of ending question is, how do you handle this? How do you help someone in this situation while also keeping in mind trauma-informed care, right? We want to empower people. We want to give them choice and autonomy. We want to be understanding. And a part of what we're doing here is helping them, be productive and create full lives for themselves and set them up for success. Okay. So Elena is an 85-year-old Congolese woman who lives alone with her small dog, Gus. Elena lost her husband a few years ago. She still struggles with grief over his death and has days where she still cries uncontrollably. Her family checks in on her often, but struggles with knowing what to do on days she experiences deep sadness. Elena is aware that the neighborhood she is currently living in is not particularly safe. Despite the increasing crime, she continues to feel safe in her home and maintains relationships with her friends and the support of her church family, who also check in on her weekly. However, her children encourage her to move to a safer, closer residence. Elena has been experiencing some increased health problems recently. She suffers from back pain, osteoporosis, and diabetes. She has been prescribed several medications to manage her health issues and has been experiencing increased side effects due to the new medicines. Elena works hard to maintain her daily routine. Still, her friends have noticed that she has started to engage in some unusual behaviors, such as walking without Gus or being alone after dark. She has self-reported that she has some dizzy spells and was falling more. So there's a lot there, right? So my kind of question is, as volunteers, how do you help her, keeping in mind trauma-informed care principles? And then with a lot of these, like, what is the moment where you reach out and you ask for help, right? You know, we're volunteers, we're not mental health professionals. When is the time where we reach out to Chan or reach out to whatever organization you're working with and say, hey, this person needs a referral, or this person needs more help than we are able to provide for them? Okay,
So let's have you all be in two groups. Tanya, you can divide yourself in half. Both places. And, folks online, I will mute you so that you can talk to each other. You should unmute yourselves so you can talk to the other online folks. And I'll mute you on my end so that
I don't think that'll actually happen that way.
I
you can put
will
in a breakout.
turn the volume down.
Yes, that's what you said, yeah.
That's what I will do. But you are an online team navigating this same scenario.
I have a question.
Hello.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Mary Lou and Steve.
Hey,
Hi,
Deb.
Steve.
Hello. Good to see you.
Wow, this is quite the scenario. Um,
Yeah,
my first reaction is the part where it talks about side effects due to
This is the
medications.
part. I swear the rest of them are easier. So I was looking at my notes, I was like, I don't know when to get started.
All right, to clarify online team, she said that their children are.
There we go. That's better.
were we supposed to be hearing that?
I don't know.
I think she accidentally unmuted on her end. so-
Yeah, I think, yeah. So, the first steps of a trauma-informed response, is that what we're,
Yeah, and I think just yeah, what are our first steps?
yeah.
And to me, what sticks out really fast is the medical side that she probably needs to consult with a doctor about because of the side effects from her medications, producing, dizziness and that. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts? Helping her reach out to a medical provider is my answer, perhaps.
Yeah, that seems to be the first thing that, as you look through all of this, that is the piece that rises to the top.
Well, it's certainly the most immediately dangerous, you know. What but my first step though, to visit with her and to really do deep listening. What does she think she needs or wants?
Yes, you're right, Deb. You're exactly right.
And does she have any resources or people that she's planning to reach out to or already reaching out to?
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly. And in that kind of listening, asking, I've just got to say, I'm really struck by the fact that she's been walking without her dog and then at night. So you start to wonder about dementia,
Right.
but what are her priorities and what has she tried to do already?
Yeah. I agree with both of those. Finding out more from her, and who maybe, like you said, find out more about who is her doctor. That could we help her reach out if she decided she would like that. Who is her doctor that we could help her contact, because sometimes the health system and getting a hold of a doctor's office is a major thing all in itself.
Well,
So
there again, the question about what, is she on, has she qualified for Medicare or insurance, or maybe she goes to a place like Clinica, or I don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully she would be able to engage with all of those, questions. Um, and we could also, after engaging with her, reach out to Chan and find out more background from Chan. I mean, has there been doctorate assist friends or people from Chan or host family, whatever, assisting her with clinics, like we've assisted Hamida and, our past situation. Find out who those I mean, are we I'm not quite sure. Are we the host? We are the host family here, right? We are the host team.
That's my understanding,
Okay.
but it doesn't say how long she's been here. She's already in a neighborhood, you know.
I think there's I guess the whole question of, that I was wondering about was if she's doing things that are, that could be dangerous, like walking at night and things like that, you know. At what point do you try to not just give her advice or suggest things or talk to Chan, but actually get more involved in trying to help her or engineer, if she has family, talking to somebody? Or is that outside of the scope of the responsibility?
That's a good question, Steve. I was just thinking of that myself. Could we just contact the family? It says the family checks in with her often.
Mhm. Are they seeing the same things? Maybe some conversation with the family, just asking those questions.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think we could prioritize what to address, first, make sure she, we address the walking alone at night, and that's not safe. That's immediate. And then the dizziness, those two are kind of intertwined there at the top there. And then checking in with the family and, all of that. That sounds like if we addressed it, focused on that, because then there's this other part that she's experiencing grief,
Yeah,
and her family struggles knowing how to help her because she's so deeply sad. So I don't know, there's just a lot of moving parts on here.
well, how about this for a time, as far as when do you reach out to Chan or others for help? Um, After the group has listened and got a sense of her priorities, what she thinks is important, if her physical safety is at risk and it's not one of her priorities, that to me would be a time to reach out to Chan.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I feel so do we have an answer? I don't know when we get back.
I don't either. I don't know.
Uh, I feel like that's a good answer. That we, first steps, and then there are other things as a host team. Maybe we could offer to walk with her, sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's- she's
Yeah.
experiencing deep sadness and loneliness. Maybe set up a rotating schedule that, we could, as a team, you know, offer to walk with her, and so that she, has that companionship and maybe gets into a good habit of doing it during the day and not at night. I don't know. I think the main thing is we need to reach out and get more help medically for her, medically, and from that point of view.
Mhm.
I would say equally as important is trying to make sure she's not putting herself in danger, immediate danger by
Yeah,
walking in
immediate,
somewhat of an unsafe neighborhood.
unsafe neighborhood, yeah, yeah. Uh,
So I think those are both high,
talk,
both high
yeah,
priorities, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it starts with what you said, Deb, engaging with her, getting her input, um, and just gauging her capability of engaging her capability of engaging. If she's just at a loss and just, is quiet and doesn't really, talks about anything or starts crying, we can kind of gauge from there,
Mhm.
maybe how much she's able to contribute to her own help.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think-
yeah.
I think we found the perfect answer.
I think so. Uh, should we, is there a way to,
There was just, what, this isn't really, I just wanted to make one comment, but it's not really what we were tasked with. But one of the ways that, of trying to listen to her for what is upsetting her, what she's worried about, why she's crying, one of the questions I would feel like asking, I don't know if this is right or not, but if, how do they handle this if it's grief? Well, how does that, in Africa, what do you do when you're in grief? When you're in the
exactly.
Congo, what do you do when,
Yeah,
I,
culturally,
yeah, that's,
good, good point. Excellent point. Because maybe, there's a whole other way to approach.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I started thinking about those 3 levels of trauma. Um, Something happened in the Congo,
mhm,
and then there, but there's still, she's still rooted in the Congo, so how does that look? How do you do that there? Whatever that is,
yeah,
what would you do if you were in the Congo? Anyway.
Right.
yeah,
We, there's a place from South Africa, and there was this whole notion
Right,
that,
let's do
like, you lived up.
one more minute.
One more minute, then we'll share.
You know, else. This is not. Yeah. This is not, and there's great houses, and there's great prices.
Like, why wouldn't I live over there?
It's so.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, that kind of a big source as well, so, yeah.
I think that is coordination is so how actively involved are all of us. But even now you some of the kids that show up trying to know what those people. I really like to show up.
It's hard enough for older people to,
There's no way, because just go on that getting American picture. Yeah.
Well, what I think about in terms of the team is what if those kids are in some countries.
Yeah.
What if the kids are so.
Alone, yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Okay, friends, we're gonna come back together
Yeah, okay.
and share.
I wanna hear from every group, because I think everyone thinks differently about these kinds of things, and then I'll share my thoughts, but once again, there's no wrong or right answers here. All of these scenarios, like, I think I've heard, like, well, we need more information, and they are that way to just get us a little bit comfortable with the messiness of doing this kind of work. So yeah, if any group feels called to go first.
Let's ask our online folks.
You're online, so we can. Can you put them?
Well, they're on my screen and she's on.
Okay.
You can see them. Well, they see you through here. They see you all the time.
Oh.
So yes, Steve, Mary Lou, and Deb, the floor is yours. What are some of the things you discussed?
Okay, well, I think I'm gonna ask Deb to run point because I think we all came to a conclusion on what our plan might be. Deb, can you repeat that back to them?
Oh, yeah, put me on the spot. Right.
Or Steve?
My, my first, and I'm gonna do it, I'll say the first thing I said, and then you and Steve can fill in after that.
Okay,
My
okay.
my first thought was it would be really important to sit down with her and just listen carefully to what she's thinks is most important. How is it going for her? What does she think is important? What are her priorities? What has, if she is mostly concerned about, thinks the most important thing to deal with is her grief. Well, then what has she done so far? Or the other question I had was, well, what would that be like for you if you were in the Congo? I just wanted to hear not only what her priorities are, but what would be her normal way in the Congo of handling those things.
Yes, I love that answer, Deb. That was a great answer.
Yeah, yeah, she was right on. And then
There's more. Yeah, you guys go. Steve and Mary Lou know.
I will do it. And then Steve, if can bring up the conclusion apparently. So I was most concerned about the medical aspect that was being presented. And after engaging with her, if she is capable of, engaging and we can glean something from that that could be helpful, that she would also agree would be helpful to help her contact, for her. I don't know, I don't think HIPAA allows you to do that, but help her contact, find out her medical provider who prescribed the medicines where she is experiencing these side effects, because she's at danger at this point of falling, and it could be because of that. And she has some serious medical conditions, and just maybe find a way to contact or help her contact this the medical wherever she's seeking her medical treatment and getting medical prescriptions. And then I know Steve had another issue that we thought was the top. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, if she's actually leaving her home and going out in the community in an unsafe situation, without her dog and perhaps even becoming confused at times on where she is, that I think is kind of an immediate issue. And we talked about, is there a way to work within the resources we have or family resources to communicate with the various organizations and people to see if there's not some way to organize so that she could have somebody with her when she's walking in the community, on kind of a rotating basis or something that would give her the chance to do that and have somebody there in case she's either medically or other situations where safety might be a concern.
I think you all made a lot of really good points. Like, I really liked asking her about her priorities, right? Because we're trying to prioritize her autonomy and her choice in this situation. Also talking to her about how she would handle something like this, like grief back in the Congo, right? We want to learn more about her culture and what's important to her. And it's okay to ask questions about, what was life like back home, as long as we're not prying into really difficult things. I like Steve, at the end, you said, making sure that she can have someone with her when she's going on walks. So understanding, it's important for her to go on these walks. How can we make it safer for her to do so rather than encouraging her to just stop doing something that she enjoys and makes her happy? And then, yeah, the medical issues. I think it's always good to ask questions, right? How many doctors prescribed you these medications? Asking questions, she's told you about her side effects. Has she talked to her doctor about her side effects? Because maybe she thinks if she just tells her volunteers, somehow they'll tell her doctors, and we know that that's not how the system works here, right? So I think clarifying questions in every single one of these scenarios, that's a part of it as well.
I don't think there's anything anybody else can add. I think we're done.
Who's got something?
How do you feel about that?
I think what I'm hearing, and please don't misunderstand, I'm not being critical.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing is we're trying to fix. We're responding to some information that's in print. Where did it come from? And what I immediately went to was what she has told me, which is she self-reported that she has had some dizzy spells and was falling more. She has volunteered that information. Where did the rest of it come from? Are those observations from the 3 sources of family, church, and me, and whatever my relationship is? And so now all of a sudden I get concerned. And again, am I projecting my concerns on what I think is a reasonable way to live and safe?
Yeah.
So I may have a problem going out after dark and walking. She may not. And are we assuming that it's because of her age that she's not realizing that she's unsafe? But if she, let's say I'm the host family and she's with me and she goes out after dark in this neighborhood, do I want to question that? Or do I just want to say, can I go with you? Medication, she's 85. I think back pain, osteoporosis, and diabetes is normal. There's nothing abnormal about that.
Yeah.
And unless she's asking for specifically, could I see someone, or I ask, would you like to? But do I know that she's complained about back pain? Do I know that she's complained about other pain, that osteoporosis is just normal? Most of us in this room probably have it diagnosed. And diabetic is reasonable for 85. And then medications, am I again imposing my evaluation that her medications are causing the dizziness and spells and moving, or is she concerned about it? And again, if I've heard that from her, I can address that, but to just question it without it being something she has offered to me.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to know where this information has come from, except for the last sentence.
Yeah.
Is that a compiled, we've sat down as a group, as her children, as her church companions, and as her host team, to talk about what we've observed? And have we decided it's a good thing to address it?
Yeah.
Or how exactly have we been exposed to this information?
Yeah, I think with all of these, thinking of them as observations that you have made during your time with her, right? So all of these things, I'm just, putting it up here in a case scenario, but
Okay.
in this situation, think of, you have observed all of these things about this person that you know and are working with. But I really do appreciate what you're saying, right? I think it's important for trustworthiness to only be bringing up stuff that maybe she's coming to you with, right? Because if she's coming to you with a concern saying, hey, I'm concerned about these medications or something like that, she's trusting you with that information. If you are coming to her with that information without her directly talking to you about it, that can be maybe put up a block, or maybe end some of the relationship you build, or make her feel like she doesn't trust you. I think it's also important to consider, and something I have learned working with refugees, is that American communication, we are very direct, right? We will talk to each other and ask for exactly what we need. We'll say, this is what happened, this is what I need. Most other cultures are way less direct. They do more indirect communication. So there can be instances where maybe they are trying to tell you something without directly communicating that to you. And I think understanding that, and also understanding that, you know, they live in American society now to a certain extent, they're going to have to learn how to be more direct. And as someone who has a trusted relationship with them, learning, you know, when they're doing something to cue you in to something that they're feeling or something that they're experiencing. And they might not, even if you guys are great friends and you spend a lot of time together, they might not always feel comfortable asking directly for what they want or need.
So like when you said she's self-reported dizzy spells and falling,
Mhm.
you know, that's a big, to me, that's whoa, having it gone through aging parents, that's a big alert. And that part she did
Yeah.
say, so it's like that, is that a cry for help or,
Yeah.
you know, is that a cry for like, okay, what can you do to help me with what I'm experiencing
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to view it, right? If she's self-reporting it, maybe she's just saying to you, oh, I feel more dizzy, or, you know, I'm falling more. Maybe she's not saying, I need help because I'm feeling more dizzy, but her telling you these things is maybe her way of asking for help, right? And figuring out how you navigate that relationship as someone who is a trusted friend and also someone who wants to respect her boundaries. It's all a part of the messiness.
I was just saying that's where I would start.
For sure. I think that's a great
And
place to
maybe I
start.
can get to the medications, or maybe I can get to.
Yeah.
You know, the observations.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you bring up a really good point too, though, about safety. And I think our host team has run into this both times around safety with both guests that we've worked with about what we felt was safe and what they were expressing they were comfortable with. And so one of the things, and this is like very compound lots of issues, we can lay out connections and resources and things, but we might not feel okay with their decision. I mean, she might want to keep walking on her own in the dark without her dog, without anybody in a neighborhood that her children feel uncomfortable with. And something could happen to her, and it is not like she has the right to choose that, and we can lay things out, but we also have to practice being really uncomfortable with possible consequences. I mean, I felt that way
Yeah.
about like Luis and Carlos in the car, and I'm like, if they got in an accident, I would feel awful. If they got pulled over and were detained, I would feel awful, and I would still not be responsible.
I have a sort of question, I think more than a kind of knowing what to do, and that is she lives in a web of relationships,
Mhm.
and we are one of those relationships. So how does one understand those other relationships? You know, and you know, there's again, a sort of perhaps an Americanized local assumption that we kind of jump to like, oh, well, you know, this is the kid's problem, you know, and that may not be culturally appropriate, that may not be a relationship, that even if they are checking in on her often, it may or may not be a relationship or a set of relationships that she would prioritize as the decision makers for her. Yeah, so it's just more of a question, it's sort of like, how do you start to
Yeah.
think about that and tease that out?
I think it's hard, especially trying to figure out family dynamics, right? I don't know, can we ever truly understand like the dynamics we have, you know, that we have with our children, our parents? I think a lot of it is through relationship building with her, right? Spending time with her, talking to her about her kids and her family. I'm sure if they're, you know, her kids live here as well, at some points you will meet them, they'll be over at the same time. I think it's totally okay in this situation to be building relationships with her kids, with her other friends, right? Because you're all looking out for her, you all have a common goal. And especially when there are some clients who it takes a lot of coordination, right? She's older, like maybe she needs someone to be over there every single day. And you guys need to coordinate between all of these different groups, who's gonna be over there, who's gonna be handling what. I think doing that is totally okay, as long as you continue to center her wishes and her autonomy. And, you know, if there's, you know, a day where you're over there and you say, oh, you should talk to your kids about this, and she says, no, I don't want to, then respecting that, right? But I do think it's hard, and I do think also in a volunteer role, it's okay to be building relationships with the client, and then if they have all of these other people who are involved, building relationships with them, as long as the client is okay with you doing that. Let's do the next one. This
So
one,
they were gonna get easier, right, Maya?
yeah. This one feels like something that we will encounter with almost every single client in some sort of way. So Miguel is a 25-year-old asylum seeker from Guatemala. Miguel experienced discrimination at the hands of the government because he is an indigenous person. Miguel had his passport stolen from him on his journey to the United States. He is now very reluctant to share any of his documentation with anyone in the United States. He says he does not trust anyone in the US with his personal information. Miguel does not have friends or family here. He only has support from his volunteers, all of you, and the organization they work with. He is very isolated and prefers to stay home alone because he feels that he is safer there. Someone has suggested Miguel get a pass to a local recreation center. He is interested, but nervous. How are we gonna help him navigate this situation as his volunteers?
All right, back in your group.
But I think I get what a company, I guess, yeah, comes back as a policy, right? Really, that's why, what he's going to say by himself and in his home.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this seems not as many moving parts. However, I'm having difficulty floating to the top what we need to focus on first. I guess checking in with him to see how's he doing, how's he feeling. What does he think about that suggestion to go to the rec center? Offering maybe to go with him to see more about the actual seeing the rec center and just seeing what it's like and accompanying him there. Maybe even asking if there's a guest pass that we could have so we could experience it both together. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I was wondering what's his objective? I mean, I can read this and I can assume off the top that his objective is to live in the United States now. He's discriminated at home. He wants he's here to escape from that discrimination. So I'm assuming he's looking to live here. He came all this way. But to do that, obviously he's got to be able to function. And what's offered here is sounds like it's somebody that's trying to help him function. So I think, and he doesn't have any visible support other than our organization that is apparent here either. So as a team, I think a lot of it would be, okay, talking to him and thinking through ourselves, what are the things he needs to do to get started functioning in this country that he's never been in before, and be able to get food and do the things that he needs to do, have a place to live and whatnot. Sounds like maybe he has a place to stay. I don't know. But, this getting a pass to a local recreation center, that's a good start. But is there, does the team need to work with him and kind of say, well, let's get him to walk before he can run? Here's a few things that he can do to get started. Just some thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good. I'm stuck on he doesn't trust anyone. So I think a lot of the first steps are gonna be just basic, get to know and be trustworthy as people, connecting with him. I mean, cause it'll, I mean, I don't know, that's just,
Yeah.
be able to spend time just getting him to know us, that if we say we're going to bring a meal over, we bring it over, that we've
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
that trustworthiness,
Yeah.
and then he is very isolated, so that's, I think, um, going to his house, at least at the beginning,
Yeah.
because that's where he feels safest,
Yeah.
and yeah, what's his objectives, or what does he want to get started on, you know,
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
like
Maybe
Steve
just
said.
explore, what were your interests back in Guatemala? What music did you like to listen to? Uh, what are your favorite foods? Just finding ways to engage, like Steve said, baby steps first, maybe not jump right into the recreation center. That might be a big step. But like you said, Deb, finding ways to build trust.
Or what,
Uh,
yeah, or what is it about going to the rec center that makes him nervous? What would he, you know, what's the barrier? Does he want to deal with it or not? I don't know. The other question is, um, at what point, I mean, she had given us, 2-point question, when do we know, at what point do we reach out to the Chan or other people for help?
mhm. Yeah. Um,
And I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is, um, over helping him.
Yeah.
Meaning being there for him at every step of the way, it
mhm,
may not help him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
mhm.
And trying to, because he can't just stay in his house in the United States and he can't support himself and all of these other things. So, that to me says, you have to, you can, I think, start in a very gentle way, but you really have to help him and encourage him to make progress.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I think also to find what community could he reach out to outside of us? Is there a Guatemalan community? I bet there is. Uh, I would imagine that may be something that we could ask Chan. Is there a community we could help him contact, or would he like that? I guess the whole thing that I'm getting from a lot of this now is just checking in with first. Is that something you would like? Is that something that interests you? Always asking that first, and then going from there. I tend to go right to, let me fix you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all of our immediate reaction, but I think it was a good point that Maya made, that, or I think she's the one that mentioned it, that, getting them comfortable, working that early on in the relationship is pretty important. And I However you do that, that's, again, I think you start slow, but then begin to try to figure out if there's ways to help him grow from there. So,
Mhm.
Mhm.
you know.
All right, let's do one more minute. One more minute on my team.
You know, last time, saying, please, like, you better start with it. You can't go and replace that. Or other 20 minutes.
All righty then.
We don't like. That's right. My secret identity.
All right, let's have this table share first this
Yeah.
time.
Understand.
The floor is yours.
Not all at once, why? What we were thinking about really comes back to getting to know him and that whole relationship building.
Yeah.
And just seeing what is he, finding out about his experiences first and foremost. And if he has a desire to get out of that, his apartment or to meet other people, helping him navigate what kind of scenarios would feel good to him. So even if, we said, oh, would you be interested in going to a rec center? Let me tell you what it's like there. Like Linda was saying, most rec centers, if you have a pass, you can just say, oh, I'm gonna bring this person as a guest and reassuring them, you do not have to share information about your name. You do not have to give them any other information. Finding a time to go when it's not real crowded, so that it's not overwhelming with lots of people and just that nervousness of it being in a crowded space. And maybe he's not interested in going to a rec center, maybe he doesn't like sex, but trying to get to know him well enough to know what kinds of things he's interested in, and if he would like to meet some other people, and trying to find an avenue in which maybe you can accompany them or find, ways that he will feel safe to engage with other people.
All right.
I think the other thing is to understand when he doesn't have friends and family, that there's a nuance that he's indigenous and that we cannot assume that hanging out with a community from Guatemala would satisfy that need of being in community, because there are separations within that, right? And he has suffered from that already. I think many times we go, oh, they're from the same country and we can't do that. I shared that when I was a teenager. I went to a campus ministry event at my school, and somebody from El Salvador was talking about the Civil War, and then I spoke up afterwards, and he kind of verbally attacked me at the time, right? And so we're both from the same country, having gone through the same Civil War. But apparently I was on a different side of it that she did not approve of, right? So there are all these dynamics that we don't know sometimes, right? And to question, figure that out.
The tripod over here. To go.
I guess I'll try and summarize. We started out wondering if the suggestion to go to a rec center was a little bit forced on him. Maybe forced maybe is too strong of a word, but the fact that he's nervous about it, maybe we would back off a little bit and try for something a little bit, doesn't require any documentation at all. So maybe a rec center would fall into that, but maybe it wouldn't. And maybe looking for ideas that could provide a little more social, I guess, connections for him. The idea of if he, played any sports or had any other interests back home, I think you'd want to try to, maybe come up with something along those lines. And playing on team sport is always a good way to make friends pretty fast, so that was one thing we had. I don't know, and then where do we go?
Or even just go observe, you know, if he was interested in something, maybe take him to a game,
Yeah.
or take him, you know, like you suggested, just go to the rec center and check it out, and, you know, and not even look into a past. You know what our rec centers are like, and like you said, just look at it, so.
Yeah, I think I heard your group say, does he even know what a rec center is, right? Is he just saying yes because someone from his team suggested that it's something he could do? Does he actually know what it would be like to go and be in a rec center?
All right, online team, you wanna chime in?
I guess, I had a question, and, you know, I think all the suggestions that were made cover a lot of the immediate steps. But it's, at what point is there any, at what point in a situation like this would you begin to look at and consider the long-term capability of Miguel to be able to take care of himself from the standpoint of finding a job or something like that? Is it just, the way the scenario is written, is it just too early to get into that? Or is there, I remember with the family we started to work with, that was something that they were capable of doing some things, and there were discussions about how we could perhaps help, or suggestions about how we might help make that happen. But is it, do you have to just assess the situation and try to figure out what makes the most sense in that scenario?
Yeah,
So
I think that's a good approach, like with all guests that you would work with, eventually they do have to get a job, right? And eventually they do have to be independent, and we want to be preparing them for that. So, you know, he says he is isolated, prefers to stay home alone because he feels safer, and we respect that, understand that, and eventually he will have to get a job. He will have to leave his apartment. How can we start getting him out of the house in a way that feels safe and comfortable? And then we can build on that to prepare him for independence, right?
Our table also talked a little bit about like finding low stakes places to model and accompany, and then have him move through the process of sharing documentation, because to get access to medical care, to go through asylum seek, like the process of seeking asylum, to find a job, any of those things, our society demands that. And so is the rec center maybe a chance where maybe it's less about actually what the working out is and more about practicing, like here you just have to give your name and your address, or you can go a few times with a guest pass and then you can see, you know what, I want to be here, and then I can give my information and see it's safe, or I'll watch you give your information, see that there's no negative consequences, and or the library, or like little low stakes practice, because there are very high stake things where if he has an accident and he needs medical care, then that's a requirement that could cause a traumatic reaction.
Yes, definitely.
The food bank, you know, all those little things. Yeah. Because I appreciate that, Steve, thinking about like, what is the long term and how do we meet people where they are, but move incrementally always a little bit to the next level of what's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Let's skip that one for now. Let's do this one. Wajma is a 28-year-old widow and single mother of 3 from Afghanistan. Her kids are aged 6, 4, and 3. You, her volunteer, come over and see that the 3 kids are playing outside their apartment building without any adult supervision. You let Wajma know, and she tells the kids to come inside. You come back over a few weeks later and the kids are outside by themselves again. When you bring the kids inside the building, Wajma tells you that she is in her online English class and the kids were making lots of noise, so she told them to go outside. She says that this is not an issue in her home country when you let her know that it is not safe for the children to be outside without supervision. Wajma tells you that she is struggling to adjust to single motherhood and cannot manage everything that's expected of her while also caring for her children and grieving her late husband.
Oh.
How do we help?
Wow.
All right. 6 minutes.
We lost
You're
Steve.
staring.
Did we lose Steve?
I don't see him.
Wow.
I can, as before.
I wasn't looking at him.
Like, I'm sorry. I asked you.
Yeah, the only thing
Oh,
I'm
shoot.
gonna say is like,
I
Is
was.
he
I'm a
back?
parent of couldn't tell kids,
Uh,
but
I-
I
I'm-
was not entering you on.
Yeah,
I don't have
no,
much of
he
a
might have
fear
had
around
to,
maybe an hour and different children.
get going.
And we and people to call social groups.
Mhm.
On.
Whatever
Like,
he was.
I mean,
Yes.
like, I have
I'm-
been
And
like,
that's a
I
big,
run
big
in
step,
to
right?
get
Basically,
living
for
on
we
the
all
shelf,
know.
but now I'm so fine about it, but like.
We
it's
need
such
them to
an
mute.
hour is precious. Literally,
Yeah,
2 hours is
and-
even more precious.
I don't know. I'm, there we go.
Right, maybe after that area, you can take them for 2 hours.
Or English class and then.
Oh, gosh.
But she can take a shower without anybody.
I can't.
Right.
Yeah. We need Marissa, we need someone to mute you.
Yeah.
So what's outside of
Yeah.
So we're already volunteering to take care of it.
Offering.
Marissa, can you mute?
Attention.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's.
So they're playing outside. Our own.
I can't hear you, Deb, hardly.
No, same here. We'll just have to listen to them and think about it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and think about it. Exactly.
We're actually not worried about,
You know, 9 in the morning, it is really, I understand, but I can say, okay, in another country.
And
You
not
know,
all your neighbors.
I mean, I know when I've gone over to Mexico to loan years.
Are gonna see it that
You know,
way.
kids are in the streets, and they're just, so
To
you
give her
have
that
to know where
information.
they're coming from. This is what they do in my, home country.
Maybe there's a way.
We have to know where they
The
are.
volunteer roles to fill in.
And,
Well, because
Especially during.
you
height
time created,
You know,
should have
class or where.
Yeah, with the consequences of the employment of social services.
yeah,
They're gonna take your kids away from you. I mean, that would just be a nice.
This parallels, the situation.
I guess the other thing I'm wondering about
The registration,
is,
and the fact that I
Is there-
shared in this country.
I mean,
in
the
this
6-year-old,
town.
can the 6-year-old be?
And I noticed there were, I was
I mean,
cracking down.
Did you see that? I'm expired. I didn't see that.
And I think about
And-
things that I picked up, and,
Is
and all I did
pre-K
was try to share
open to-
information. And the fact that
Oh,
I
it's
just shared.
But I mean, I know, but it's not. But what I'm wondering is if, is there a larger part
That
of
I
the
said
structure?
that, and I had to take action. And
I mean,
that's
if
one of the
they are-
reasons.
If it is during.
The only place that.
We would absolutely be mandated, that's
So if I
what
could
I
have a list,
you have like
maybe what I want,
maybe not,
which is this vehicle,
where you can be, if you have trouble going to Colorado.
registration.
That would be like up for
Getting
the
it legal,
priority as a
so
team.
what's working
I've
for me
never
already has
done
been
an scenario,
not
as
here.
a team.
And.
But
Are
I'm
there
right.
also things,
I know.
Everybody
Free
that
kids.
I,
So I tell her that
pre-K,
in this country,
I don't know if there's,
right, but it's options.
but it's options, so I don't think they would be.
let's split that just a little, see what I'm saying?
so you could take advantage of that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
also.
And yeah, it's only 2 days, but
choice.
Next year it's 4 half days.
It's
funny how I know these things.
Round two. Yeah, as who's going in at 11, you know?
Right, and the thing, if we know we're coming trauma informed, and she has triggers.
I
that
wanna know
doesn't
that.
say that. But this is.
Alien, what
I'm
is it?
I'm sorry. So we're gonna, it's probably safer to assume there's trauma than there is than to not.
You know, she's
But,
struggling
It's actually, back to like
language.
first
Language.
So Steve, she never,
reflecting what
For her.
she
You're
she
muted.
never,
self-reports and saying.
she forgot to
So she's
mute.
reporting.
Well, that makes
that
it easier
she
for
thinks
us.
it's
We
struggle.
can't do
So
I know it. We're just
that's where we
living.
start, like, maybe you're right, we let the specifics of.
I mean, we did.
Outside, go there and address what she said about herself. This is really hard. And then to offer.
But there's a
Let
bigger,
her lead and on the
Yeah,
strategy.
that's
there's a
not the
bigger need
solution.
here.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And it might
Struggling
not
to
start
adjust
with
to single
Maybe
motherhood,
child
managing
care
your
class.
perspective
Maybe
maybe
it's-
while also caring.
Maybe
I mean, that's.
And in a new country, right, a different country, where kids
So-
don't play outside in the park.
You don't know how to communicate them. Knows you need them.
So solving,
Debbie,
so there's a balancing act between solving the immediate,
Not picking up her
you know,
phone.
there's this immediate.
Oh,
Yes.
that's a good idea.
You know, but this also then comes back.
Here she comes.
Still outside and I'm,
Right.
I'm responding to that person's.
And hear much
reaction
more, even
To it instead of
Country.
to what I'm
I
hearing
mean,
from.
Right,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
and we can do switch your whole mind, country, your whole language,
How we.
there's a lot to it.
Yeah. The disappeared. And that bar disappears and then.
Oh, we're not muted.
Yeah.
All right, friends, we're about to come back together.
No.
We're gonna come back together in just a minute. 30 seconds.
Center and
Wow, they muted us.
Oh,
No.
Hear you now. All right, who wants to go first? Y'all haven't gone first yet. Off you go.
We recognize the layers of, there's, in the way this case scenario is laid out, there's some centering of the volunteer, like that you notice multiple times,
Mhm.
this thing happening.
Yeah,
And so we had some thoughtful reflection on how much is this about. But do we act from the things we're feeling first, or do we act first from what Washma's telling us? And that's that's where our conversation ended, that she is telling us that she's struggling to adjust to single motherhood and she's overwhelmed. And it's about both grief and parenting, and that maybe that's the place to start rather than the specific situation of the children's outdoor presence. To let her be the one to, so if we say, okay, you're overwhelmed, and one of the ways you're attending your class is sending the kids out. How can our team be, what would be supportive for you right now in this?
All right, online team, your turn.
We haven't had a chance to talk about this one. We weren't muted. But I think, you know.
Go for it. What,
that
Marissa,
is-
you didn't mute, so we could not hear each other. So, but, but Steve has, take it away, Steve.
Yeah, no, I think that, trying to, you know, it sounds like kind of to leverage off what Pastor Steph said, is there a way to help? Seems like having some help with the children might help her attend class or whatever. So is there a way to look at using our resources to rotate through or in some way give her some support while she's gaining skills in other areas? But again, we didn't get a chance to really chat too much, so, but we liked looking at each other. Everything was good.
You weren't lip reading? Oh, I'm sorry. Your turn.
I think we kind of had you kind of look step the same too, is you kind of start with, obviously this woman is overwhelmed. I think we'd all be overwhelmed if we were in her situation. But what are her where is she feeling right now? What are her priorities as far as trying to, she's obviously struggling, but what are her priorities as far as things that she wants to address first, or ways in which she thinks we could help her out or walk beside her during each task she's trying to accomplish. And some of that might be providing some childcare. Some of it might be, helping her get connected to other people maybe in the community that could also support her. But also, like, when we were talking with Marissa's pointing out that, in your home country, and maybe you were living in a community where everybody knew each other and everybody looked out for your children, and yes, it was safe there, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
In the United States, where not everybody knows everybody, and we would not want the worst thing to happen is her kids be taken from her just because somebody was reported them as being unsafe.
Yeah, I'm the volunteer coordinator at Lutheran Family Services and their refugee program, and I always do this scenario in my training there, mostly because of what you just mentioned at the end. Like, I appreciate centering, her, what she needs right now, and connecting her to resources. And I think that's a great way to approach the situation. And I think as trusted volunteers, letting her know that there could be legal ramifications of having her kids outside by themselves is important, because maybe she doesn't know, right?
Okay.
It's very possible in most other countries, it's okay to let your kids outside by themselves. The community takes care of the children. Here, that's not how things work, right? So letting her know that, if the kids are outside by themselves, someone can make a report. Not scaring her. I had someone recently, a volunteer, tell one of our single mothers something about, if your kids are outside, they'll be taken away. And she was so scared afterwards. So doing it in a tactful way, right? Having the conversation, like, I'm not trying to tell you how to parent your children. I'm just telling you, the cultural considerations of what life is like here. We live in a very litigious society. And then also compounding that is the fact that she is an asylum seeker, right? So if she gets in trouble with CPS, if her kids get taken away, or even if there's just a CPS check, that is something that will be added to her asylum case. It will make it harder for her to win asylum, right? So all of those things, making sure you have that conversation with her in a respectful way, in a way that you're explaining things to her instead of telling her what to do. And then at the end of the day, right, everything it's her decision about what happens. And kind of being able to come to terms with that in a way if you can. Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in for a second?
Go for it. Those are my
All right,
my
cool.
few scenarios.
One thing that I think we touched on in conversations, but that I just wanted to ask is like, what were you feeling in yourself, either in a situation where you're like, yeah, I mean, I think many of us notice, wow, this really, my hope is the volunteers are gonna explain, like, these are the risks this poses to, that are bigger and wider, not, I think your kids are unsafe.
Yeah.
But like, what are some of the things that were in these scenarios, you were imagining, gosh, this would be hard for me to let go and let someone make their own choices, or to navigate, because how do I know where the line is? Just what was coming up for you if you were imagining this is our guest in each of these? Were there particular things that you felt harder to address if you're trying to bring it close to say, this is actually the guest I'm working with and not a case study?
I think for me is, the hardest part is thinking that I have the wisdom because I know this culture and this society and you know, just listen to me because I don't want you to get in trouble. I want to protect you. And I know that's a very superior, you know, superiority oriented way of thinking. And so it's really hard to rein that in though, for me.
Yeah.
But I know it's necessary, so trust me, I will do it, but it's gonna be, I will feel the tension inside to let people make mistakes. But I think the biggest was really key in there was hearing that inform them about the consequences of the choices. And then make a choice. Right? Step back.
Yeah, and I think that can be really hard, right? Because we are experts in our own culture to a certain extent, and that's why we do this, right? That's why accompaniment is a thing for refugees and asylum seekers. I think you can always turn into a moment of learning about each other's cultures, right? You're telling them, you know, this is what parenting looks like in the US, right? Asking questions about like, what did it look like back home? Like, what was it like for the kids to play outside when you were back home? Making it more of a mutual conversation rather than you just telling them what to do, because I know that can feel kind of uncomfortable, like, you know, these are the ramifications of your actions, which I think it's important for them to be informed, and volunteers are a great way to do that. I think being able to turn it into a conversation when you can kind of help with that tension that you feel.
Thanks for sharing.
One of the things that you were saying, and it's not directly, answering the question, but there's this kind of opportunity to learn about different culture, but there's also an opportunity to talk about what we have in common. You know, that this scenario, I don't care what culture you're in, this is a tough scenario. You know, to be a single parent, to have 3 kids, you know, even not to be a single parent, but to have 3 children in less than 3 years, I mean, that's just a lot. Grandchildren. There's a lot, just let me tell you, but, you know, it's just, and so being able to find a way to really I don't know, normalize, but empathize and say, yeah, what you're feeling is like, who wouldn't feel this?
Yeah.
When I think about the first scenario and all the different support pieces, you know, when in the second 2 and 3, there was a greater sense of isolation in our relationship with the guest. And in the first one, the need for awareness and relationship with the guest's web of support really stood out to me. The other thing, this is a longer conversation and something I should really think about. I did a training earlier this year about elder abuse, and that peaked for me a little bit in the first scenario, especially if if Elena's answer was that her kids weren't helpful or supportive to her and possibly even exploitive, then
Yeah.
the cross-checking that multi faceted network does for each other. And, you know, hoping that it's supportive all the way around, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost at the close of our time. Do you have any last comments or?
I don't, I think, I just wanna reiterate that there's no right or wrong answers or no right or wrong ways to handle situations. And I think if things come up and maybe you handle it in a way that, you know, makes a guest uncomfortable, like, it's always okay to just apologize and move on from that, right? That's part of building any type of relationship, is recognizing when you did something that maybe made someone uncomfortable and just apologizing and moving on from that. But we're all humans and we're all gonna make mistakes, especially doing work like this where there is a lot of messiness involved, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Maya?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we depart, I just wanted to give a team update. Denise has a few possible candidates in the works, but none who have fully completed their application. So once that is complete, then we can zoom in on a match for our team. And I'll chat with you soon more specifically. But that's just kind of where things are. Sounds like the folks who were ahead of us in line have been matched, and so we're up in our process to work on what will be good fit for our team and for the guests that we're supporting. So I will be in touch when I know more. I don't have a clear timeline, but we are slated, regardless of anything else, we are slated to gather June 18th. And we will be doing the, barring like, oh, we have a guest tomorrow, or yesterday. I am prepared to run our immigrant myth workshop that I was going to run when I forget which myth.
Was it snow or was it?
No, was it the power outage? Was it, I was sick? I was sick. I was really,
You got the.
really sick. Really glad we didn't have that. There we go. So that is up next, at our June meeting, unless our status changes, and then we'll, you know, prioritize specific humans over general.
General or
Humans. So otherwise, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Could you, could
Thank
you,
you for joining us. I'm sorry again about that. I know people.
Oh, thank you, Marissa. It was very helpful. I like the hands-on scenarios. It forces me to think.
Good. All right. Take care.
yeah, I-